Mount Eisenhower, 38 minutes, 390 to downtown. Appleton, 31. Stevenson, 50 minutes, 355 to the drive. Bryan, 26 minutes from 95th to downtown. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center. Partly sunny, 84 today, 71 and sunshine. Right now, next news at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by CharlesEquipment.com, keeping you powered up no matter what the conditions.
Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues now. And make sure to stay tuned to catch me, Mike Gallagher, coming up at 9, only on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Sean from Woodland Park in for Amy this morning. Mike Scott mentioned on his newscast this ice raid yesterday in Mississippi. 7 Mississippi chicken processing plants, arresting 680 mostly Latino workers in the largest workplace sting in at least a decade. And this was the coverage of that event by Shepard Smith on Fox News.
Associated Press is now reporting immigration agents arrested 680 people at a food processing plant there. Anybody know the name of the town? Morton. Morton is the home of one of the largest chicken producing or chicken farms in all the country. The chicken production houses there are the lifeblood of the economy in tiny Morton, Mississippi. And for years and decades, immigrants have worked in those facilities. If you were looking for a target to go to try to round up a bunch of people who were hard at work in the chicken processing plant, personally could think of no better target than the chicken processing plants in Morton, Mississippi. So away they went, and they just arrested hundreds and hundreds of people. Largest raids in about a decade. As I mentioned, one plant in the small community of Morton, witnesses say about 70 friends and family cried and waved goodbye. Among them, a 13-year-old child standing with his father and watching his mother put on a bus. Morton, Mississippi. 600 people rounded up and families separated with a little boy waving goodbye.
How ridiculous. You know how many gangsters' kids wave goodbye to their dad as they went away to the Huskow? How many? How many drug-dealing kids and their dads when they got arrested? Bye.
And this is not to compare people in this country illegally who are otherwise peaceful and productive to gangsters, but it is to say...
Why? They're peaceful.
Well, gangsters
Absolutely. You wouldn't even know it.
But it is to say that the bad people are the people who want to enforce the law. Bad people are people say, people in this country, people who want to come to this country, okay, fine, but you have to follow the process. Like, if you are seeking asylum, you have to make your case that your life is truly in danger. You're not just coming here for a better life. These distinctions are gone. Asylum versus economic migrant, illegal immigrant versus legal immigrant. Somebody that illegally comes across the border, we need to decriminalize that. In point of fact, AOC and the Socialist Spice Girls eliminate the border altogether. Then there's no such thing as an illegal person, right? This is one of their favorite examples of
I feel the same way about
sophistry.
taxes.
The point here is the cultural divide that this sets up. People who want to enforce the laws duly enacted are bad people, and the people who are here illegally, who've broken the law, are the good people. That's Shepard Smith's sentimental coverage, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope they feel that way about tax laws.
Well, they don't. They don't. And the ruling class, right, the immigration brings us together like no other. Elites that control our cultural and civic institutions combined with corporate interests who manipulate the government to improve their bottom line. And the rule of law is something that's just a workaround. And for regular people, it rubs them the wrong way, thus 2016, and thus where we are today, which is sort of in the same place we were in the lead up to 2016. And for more on the rot in our ruling class, please be joined by Rusty Reno, the editor at First Things, who's recently wrote about it. Rusty, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Great to be on the show.
So, the rot in the ruling class, as you see it, is what exactly?
Well, let's go back to the raid in Mississippi. I lived in Omaha for a couple decades, and when I got there in 1990, the stockyards in Omaha were pretty much over, and that was a centralized, unionized workforce. And what the corporations did is they broke the unions by breaking up the stockyards and spreading them into really 50 or 60 locations in rural areas. And then by the time you got to 2000, American workers in the stockyards, in these non-unionized stockyards, were replaced by illegal workers. And so at each level, at each time, the wages were ratcheted down. And so, I just look at these situations and say, if I'm an employer, the best possible employee is somebody who can never appeal to the government for protection against illegal working circumstances. An illegal immigrant is like an indentured servant.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it too. Look at it the other way. Look at it from the perspective of the illegal immigrant, not just sort of the third party observer who wants the rule of law enforced equitably across the board, regardless of your country of origin.
We all feel sympathy. Obviously,
yes,
people want to better their lives. They want to provide for their families, but illegal immigration, I think, is a lose-lose for most Americans, including the illegal immigrants, really, over the long run. So I agree with you. I think it's so important to enforce the laws. That's why we have them. And the rule of law depends upon, widespread commitment to actually enforce them. And one of the things that I find so troubling about our political situation is that we have, a significant element of the Democratic Party just doesn't want to enforce the law.
You write in your piece, The Rot in Our Ruling Class, 2 generations ago, there were dangerous ideologies abroad and plenty of unstable young men, yet there was no epidemic of public massacres. So what's changed over the intervening generations?
There's so many things, and it's hard to pinpoint, but you do look at that. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland in the 60s and early 70s, and it was a frankly very racially polarized environment. Racist sentiments were openly and widely expressed among many of my school friends. Yet you didn't have people, getting guns and going into shopping malls or, and killing people. And so you have to say, well, so people say, well, this is racially motivated. I don't deny that with the fellow in El Paso, but there are other factors obviously must be more important. And I think it's the general atmosphere. I don't know. I call it cultural deregulation. We've undergone a huge amount of cultural deregulation over the last 2 generations, and it seems to create an atmosphere where people think it's just okay to kill people, and that strikes me as a judgment against the people who've been running our culture for the last 2 generations.
I'm interested in this. I'm an old man. I grew up in the 70s when things were more violent for the most part in real life. We didn't have the video games and we didn't have the movies that we kind of did, but not like this. But don't you think it's too the character of the citizen that has been deteriorated from within, and his victimization of himself being told by schoolmasters, by parents, that there always is a victim and there's always a plight? Because as you were talking, I was thinking about all of the shows in the 70s that could never be made today. All of the movies in the 70s that couldn't be made today. And it's more of a reflection on the character of the Caucasian than the character of the minority. Don't you feel that way?
Well, I think it goes throughout our country. But I think back to your point about, when I was in high school, there'd be fights in the hallways. And I think there's a certain point at which it's a paradox, right? We have a school culture now that has zero tolerance for even the slightest, it's anti-bullying, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, we have this virtual world that's extremely violent. You pointed out these video games, which, I don't ever, never use them, but you see like clips from them and you think, oh my goodness, these things are really, really explicit. And so it's a disconnect. So a young person who's 20, a male, 20-year-old male, can have no experience of being hit or hitting, which I think is a sobering experience. You realize, like, whoa,
Yes,
this is for real. But at the same time, has all of this kind of virtual experience of very intense violence. I think that this contributes to, this mental detachment, because I really can't get my mind around how could you go take a gun and just in cold blood kill people, strangers? That seems very. It seems like it takes a special kind of social condition for people to be able to do that. Because as you were pointing out, that didn't happen when we were young. People did bad things. People did lots of bad things. People always do bad things. It's a fallen condition of humanity. But this kind of mass killing seems to be a sign of a pathology in our society. And I just say your fish rots from the head down. You got a society that's sick, then obviously it's a judgment on the people who lead the society.
Well, and
one thing I could say is our society for the last 2 generations has not been dominated by evangelical pastors in Texas, and so, progressives who try to say, well, we just haven't gone far enough, we haven't gotten rid of whatever repressive Christian morality, say these people, these mass killers could have done with a great deal more influence of Christianity in their lives. Thank you.
it's also concerning how few people understand sort of what you're talking about, are completely misdiagnosing it. This piece, the D.C. Press Corps, of course, is doing it on purpose, but this piece in Yahoo News is fascinating. Frightened by shootings, appalled at Trump, Americans are voting with their feet to leave. And it provides like 3 or 4 anecdotes about people from different parts of the country that are either escaping America to, Xanadu's like Spain, or considering leaving America for foreign countries because of mass shootings and because they don't like Trump's tweeting. I mean, if those are real examples that can be scaled at all, then boy, do we have a real problem in understanding root causes in this country. And not to mention a real misunderstanding of the world. Good luck in some of those countries that you want to go to if you think you're going to enjoy sort of the quality of life and the level of freedom you enjoy in this country.
And it's 330 million people, so you've always got somebody doing something crazy.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think it's there's no trend there, at least not that I can see.
No, but I mean, of course, there's no trend, but the level of hysteria, the level of hyperventilation, the degree to which the D.C. Press Corps will invent trends, quote unquote. I mean, I just haven't seen something as blatant as that Yahoo News story, which will get no coverage or discussion except perhaps here.
Well, I think part of what we're seeing is that we've lived my entire life under a kind of a liberal consensus. It really took hold after World War II, and then conservatives were the kind of safety valve, if you will, in this liberal establishment that dominated culture and so on. But they've been really losing their grip over the last decade. And so the hysteria really is coming from the fact that our society is changing. I mean, everybody says that, right? You think about it, people talk about the coming majority nation. I reject that. 85% of people born in the United States were a majority American country, super majority American country. But what they're intimating is that the world that we grew up in is changing. And what a lot of these establishment liberals don't realize is they have the most to lose in the change because they've been on the top of the heap culturally in terms of cultural power for the last 70 years. And Trump, I think, is a symptom of that. And his tweeting outrages them because he's constantly violating the etiquette that they've laid down about how you're supposed to talk about our society and problems and where we're going to go from here and so on.
I have to
So
ask.
that's how I analyze the hysteria.
I have to ask you, aren't you fascinated with the change? That it's not really progressing, but in fact it's regressing to a society that is adopting more of a top-down collectivism versus asking for the freedom and the individuality that we were promised when we grew up. I'm amazed in the fact that to me it's not progressing, it's regressing the whole time I'm being told it's led by progressives. I find it fascinating.
Well, progressives are the establishment. I think Obama, 2008, was the first time that people making more than $200,000 a year voted majority Democrat. So the Democratic Party now has become the establishment party. So it's progressive, but we'll use that term. I'm happy to concede it to them. But sociologically, they are. There's not a single Fortune 500 CEO that contributed to Trump's campaign. There's not a single elite university president that I'm sure that not a single one that voted for Trump. There's not a single head of a mainstream foundation that voted for Trump. You go down the list. So that is the establishment. That is the sort of the status quo. They have the deepest. Those people have the deepest investment in things staying the same. So I see Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders. You have a lot of Democratic voters who just like me. I'm a Republican voter. I'm not happy with the status quo. I don't like the way things are going, and so they reach out and they're trying to say, no, we want something different. And we got these whatever Medicare for all or earned basic income. I think these are bad ideas, but I kind of think, it's good for those voters. They don't want to just keep on keeping on. They want something different. I think that's widespread in our country. I think ordinary people know that the body politic is sick, and they want something different. And so we've got an interesting and I think good. I am not so pessimistic about the polarization. I think it's a good sign. It means that ordinary people are sick of the status